Bloody Sunday did not calm Russia. It detonated it. Strikes erupted across the empire. Factories shut down. Railways froze. Universities became hotbeds of dissent. Soldiers mutinied. Sailors revolted. Most famously, the crew of the battleship Potemkin turned on their officers, threw some of them overboard, and raised the red flag, a preview of horrors yet to come. This was the 1905 revolution. Nicholas panicked, not strategically, not thoughtfully, emotionally. For the first time in his reign, the idea that he could actually lose power began to feel real. Enter Sergei Witte, a rare creature in this story, a competent statesman. Witte understood something Nicholas did not. Russia was not demanding revolution. It was demanding reform. So Witte forced the Tsar's hand. In October 1905, Nicholas signed the October Manifesto, a document that promised civil liberties, expanded suffrage, and the creation of a national parliament, the Duma. To the people, it felt like victory. To Nicholas, it felt like betrayal. He believed his authority came directly from God. Sharing power wasn't compromise, it was blasphemy. But for the moment, he had no choice. The first Duma convened in 1906. It immediately began asking uncomfortable questions about workers' rights, about land reform, about limits on autocracy. Nicholas hated it. So after just 72 days, he dissolved it. The second Duma was elected. It was even worse, more radical, more critical, less impressed. Nicholas dissolved that one too. Then he changed the voting laws. Quietly, conveniently. The franchise was rewritten to favor the wealthy, the conservative, and the loyal. Peasants and workers were sidelined. Representation was trimmed until it no longer threatened him. A third Duma was opened. This one behaved, and Nicholas decided democracy might be tolerable, so long as it stayed on a very short leash. What Russia had now was not a constitutional monarchy. It was autocracy with paperwork. Meanwhile, Nicholas retreated inward. He distrusted ministers, despised advisers, resented anyone who challenged him. And Alexandra? Alexandra loathed the entire idea. She believed the Duma weakened the Tsar, offended God, and invited chaos. She wrote letters urging Nicholas to rule firmly, to ignore critics, to trust only those who were loyal and pious. The lesson Nicholas took from 1905 was not change is necessary, it was never show weakness again, which would have consequences, because while the revolution had been suppressed, it had not been resolved. The anger didn't vanish, it learned to wait. By 1906, the revolution had been suppressed, but Russia was not healed, it was sedated. The Duma existed, the Tsar still ruled, the streets were quieter, and inside the palace, something far more dangerous was happening. Because while Nicholas worried about parliaments and strikes, Alexei was bleeding. Not metaphorically, literally. The heir to the throne suffered from haemophilia, the infamous royal disease passed down through Queen Victoria herself. Some may say it was her worst royal export. A bruise could cripple him, a fall could kill him, a nosebleed could spiral into days of agony. Doctors were helpless. Treatments failed. Pain was constant. Alexei screamed. Alexandra prayed. And when prayer wasn't enough, she looked elsewhere. Alexandra was unraveling. She blamed herself for her son's suffering. She blamed fate. She blamed invisible enemies. She withdrew from court life almost entirely, suspicious, fearful, convinced that danger lurked everywhere. Ministers came and went, advisers were dismissed, only the faithful were trusted. She did not want expertise, she wanted certainty. Into this atmosphere stepped Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin, a Siberian peasant, barefoot, uneducated, unwashed, and utterly unafraid. Rasputin arrived in St. Petersburg trailing rumours that he healed the sick, that he spoke with God, that he could stare into a man's soul and see what was broken. Some called him holy, others called him obscene. Alexandra called him sent by God, because Rasputin did what no one else could. He calmed Alexei. Whether through hypnosis, prayer, coincidence, or the simple act of ordering doctors to leave the boy alone, the hemorrhaging slowed. Alexei lived. To Alexandra, this was not luck. It was proof. From that moment on, Rasputin was indispensable. When Alexei bled, Rasputin was summoned. When doctors failed, Rasputin stayed. When ministers complained, Rasputin was defended. Nicholas tolerated him, Alexandra depended on him, and the court despised him. Rasputin drank, he womanized, he preached purity by day and indulged by night. Stories spread through salons and streets alike of orgies, blasphemy, and corruption. Some were exaggerated, many were not. None of it mattered, because Rasputin had touched the heir, and the heir had lived. In Alexandra's mind, that made him untouchable. Russia did not see a healer. Russia saw a peasant mystic whispering in the ear of the Empress, influencing appointments, dismissals, and policy by proximity alone. And in a country already suspicious of Alexandra, cold, foreign, German, this was catastrophic. Rasputin did not cause Russia's problems, but he became the symbol of them, because from this moment on, every failure of the state would be blamed not on systems, not on autocracy, not on decades of repression, but on the mad monk in the palace. And when symbols harden into hatred, violence is never far behind. For a brief moment, it looked like Russia might survive. That moment was named Pyotr Stolypin. Stolypin was Nicholas's prime minister and, by the frankly depressing standards of late imperial Russia, a revelation. Intelligent, pragmatic, awake. He understood that the empire was sitting on a fault line and that pretending otherwise was not a governing strategy. He grasped something Nicholas never fully did. Repression alone would not save Russia, but reform without order would destroy it. So Stolypin did both. He convinced Nicholas to banish Rasputin, cracked down hard on revolutionaries, courts-martial, executions, exile, earning grim nicknames and a great many enemies. Russia has always been very creative with gallows humor. But he also pushed through agrarian reforms, giving peasants land ownership, encouraging stability, and attempting the radical experiment of giving people a reason not to revolt. It was slow, it was imperfect, but it was working. Allegedly, even Lenin later admitted that if Stolypin had been given another decade, Russian history might have turned out very different. Whether Lenin actually said this is unknown, but most could agree most of what happens next would almost certainly have not happened if Stolypin were around. In 1911, Stolypin was assassinated at the Kiev Opera House, shot during a performance in full view of the imperial family. Because Russia, when it decides to kill competence, prefers to do so theatrically. Days later, as he lay dying, Stolypin reportedly turned to Nicholas, crossed himself and said, "I am happy to die for the Tsar." Nicholas thanked him, and then quietly allowed his reforms to wither. The momentum died, the opportunity closed, and Russia lost the last man actively trying to save it. Because if Russian history teaches us anything, it's this: competence is rarely rewarded. It is usually buried. In 1913, the Romanov dynasty celebrated its tercentenary, 300 years on the throne. Nicholas, Alexandra, and the imperial family toured the empire, retracing the steps of their ancestors, soaking in pageantry and prayer like a nationwide reassurance tour. The crowds were enormous. The cheering was genuine. The icons came back out. Peasants knelt, soldiers saluted, priests blessed the Tsar. For a moment, Russia looked fine. Nicholas was relieved. He believed the people had forgiven him, that 1905 was behind them, that the dynasty was secure. History quietly rolled its eyes. The Grand Duchesses were older now, and the world was fascinated by them. Alexei was still alive. The future appeared, if not bright, then at least intact. But the calm was an illusion. The Duma was still sidelined. Rasputin had returned. The economy was still fragile. The anger had not gone anywhere. And Stolypin, the one man who might have navigated reform without collapse, was gone. The tercentenary wasn't recovery. It was denial with fireworks. A pause, a deep breath, because history was about to resume, and it would not be gentle. In 1914, Europe finally did what it had been threatening to do for decades. It imploded. In June, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo. One man, one pistol, one very unlucky wrong turn. The alliances snapped into place like mousetraps. Austria-Hungary moved against Serbia. Russia moved to defend Serbia, self-appointed protector of the Slavs. Germany backed Austria-Hungary. France backed Russia. Britain backed France. Within weeks, the continent was on fire. Nicholas hesitated. Of course he did. He wrote frantic letters to his cousins, George V of Britain and Wilhelm II of Germany. George was Nicholas's favourite cousin. They had grown up together. They wrote easily, warmly, without performance. They looked so alike that photographs of them side by side still unsettle historians. Wilhelm, on the other hand, was Wilhelm. Loud, insecure, intensely theatrical. The kind of man who mistook volume for authority and obsession for strength. George and Nicholas tolerated him because they were related. Family obligation is a powerful sedative. Still, Nicholas clung to the belief that family ties might still matter, that blood might outrank treaties, that Dear Willie might override mobilization schedules. Wilhelm warned him not to mobilize. Nicholas mobilized anyway. Russia felt it had no choice. Backing down would mean humiliation, and Nicholas had already endured Japan, 1905, and a decade of being quietly doubted by everyone who mattered. Germany declared war. Nicholas was genuinely shocked. He truly believed his cousin wouldn't go that far. But Europe was no longer being run by cousins. It was being run by fear. At first, Russia surged with patriotic fervor. Crowds cheered, church bells rang, young men volunteered. The old myth stirred again: Russian endurance, Russian sacrifice, Russian destiny. It lasted weeks. Then the reality arrived. Russia's army was enormous and catastrophically unprepared. Some soldiers went to the front without rifles. Others were told to pick one up from a fallen comrade. Boots were scarce. Ammunition ran out. Peasant conscripts didn't understand why they were marching into foreign countries. Wars, they believed, were fought to defend the motherland, not to die in places they couldn't pronounce. Germany crushed Russian forces in the opening campaigns. Entire armies were encircled. Casualties mounted at a terrifying pace. Russia fared better against Austria-Hungary, whose Emperor Franz Joseph possessed all the military brilliance of a damp biscuit. But victories there did little to offset catastrophe elsewhere. To make matters worse, the Ottoman Empire had entered the war on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary. 2 fronts were bad, 3 fronts were how empires quietly sign their own death certificates. Back home, the strain was immediate. Food shortages worsened, inflation soared, factories buckled under pressure, and as conditions deteriorated, the rumours began. They always do. The focus shifted from the front to the palace, toward Alexandra. She was foreign, she was aloof, she spoke Russian poorly, and now Russia was at war with Germany. Pamphlets circulated calling her the German woman. Whispers claimed she was passing secrets to Berlin, that Rasputin was her conduit, that the palace itself had been compromised. None of it was true, but truth was no longer the currency of the realm. Alexandra retreated further inward, convinced the hatred proved she was surrounded by enemies. She leaned harder on Rasputin, trusted fewer people, and dismissed ministers at an alarming rate. The government became a revolving door. The Duma begged Nicholas to return to the capital, to take control, to steady the state, to be seen. Nicholas refused. Instead, driven by pride, pressure, and a catastrophic misunderstanding of leadership, he made the decision that would finish him. By 1915, the war was going badly. Not badly in a vague, abstract sense, badly in a names on telegrams, bodies on trains, changing the capital's name from St. Petersburg to Petrograd to be less German sense. Russia was losing men faster than it could equip them. Battles were being bungled, command was fractured, morale was collapsing, and Nicholas needed someone to blame. That someone, unfortunately, was not himself. His generals argued, the Duma begged, his ministers pleaded. They all said the same thing: do not leave the capital, do not abandon the government. Nicholas ignored them. Because Nicholas believed leadership was symbolic. He believed his presence alone would inspire the troops, that his uniform would steady the army, that God would reward his courage. So, in September 1915, Nicholas made the decision that would define his reign. He dismissed his uncle, Grand Duke Nicholas, a man with actual military experience, and appointed himself Commander-in-Chief of the Russian army. Nicholas II. No battlefield experience, no strategic training, no grasp of modern warfare, but excellent handwriting. The moment he left Petrograd, he achieved 2 things simultaneously. 1, he made himself personally responsible for every military failure. 2, he handed the capital and the government to Alexandra. This was a catastrophe, because Alexandra had many qualities. Political judgment was not one of them. She distrusted the Duma, despised liberal ministers, believed compromise offended God. And now, with Nicholas hundreds of miles away at military headquarters, she ruled by correspondence and by Rasputin. Alexandra did not see this as overreach. She saw it as destiny. She had long admired Catherine the Great, the iron-willed empress who ruled decisively while men faltered. In her own mind, Alexandra was not meddling, she was stepping up. Like Catherine before her, she believed history had chosen her, a misunderstood woman, surrounded by weak men, called upon to rule firmly while her husband was absent. The comparison, unfortunately, ended there. Catherine had charm, political instinct, and the good sense to know when to listen. Alexandra had conviction, and conviction, untempered by reality, is how empires unravel. Ministers were appointed and dismissed based on loyalty, piety, and Rasputin's opinion. Some lasted weeks, others days. Government became unstable, incoherent, and visibly unhinged. Rumours exploded that Alexandra was a German agent, that Rasputin was running the empire, that the palace had lost its mind. None of this reassured anyone. Meanwhile, at the front, Nicholas discovered an unfortunate truth. Being present did not make him competent. The defeats continued. The casualties mounted. The army remained undersupplied, and now every loss belonged to him. By leaving the capital, Nicholas had severed himself from the people. By taking command, he had tied his name directly to failure. By trusting Alexandra, he had destroyed what little faith remained in the monarchy. This was the point of no return. From here on out, there would be no recovery, only momentum, and it was all moving in one direction.